Hello, 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 and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about why this self-love path, right? Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about why this self-love path can take so long to feel real. So why it can take so long for us to be able to do these self-love practices where we're showing up for ourselves, we're having compassion for ourselves, we're looking to have curiosity around what we're doing and why we're doing it, why these practices of learning to comfort ourselves and nourish ourselves and take care of ourselves and feel like we're on our own side and like we can figure things out and like we are not trapped in our circumstances or trapped in our lives, but rather that we can feel empowered and feel like adults in this process of learning to see life in a new way. Why it's hard to hear me. I don't know why that would be. Let me know if it stays being hard to hear me. I can turn, yeah. I can just speak louder and see if that helps. Okay. But yes, why becoming our own safe place and doing the work of trying to show up for ourselves and trying to be there for ourselves and developing this new relationship with ourselves when we're in pain, when we're scared, when we don't know, when we're looking for the right answer, when we feel like we're lost, when we feel like we're confused, when we feel like we don't know how to find what we should do next, when we are feeling we're abandoned or rejected or neglected by other people, when we're feeling hurt by other people, when we're experiencing negative emotions, and all of this stuff. We're trying to figure out our lives, we're trying to process, and rather than going into self-help, rather than going into trying to fix ourselves, and this is the other thing too, right? Like when we're in our coping mechanisms, when we're in shame, when we're in guilt, when we're in self-sabotage, when we're in addiction, all of these things that we struggle with as human beings, that I'm telling you that when we learn these self-love tools, we can figure things out on our own. We can figure out how to take the next steps on our growth path so that we don't feel so stuck in our circumstances. We can figure out why we're coping, why we're self-sabotaging, why we're numbing, why we're addicted, what our needs are. And we can start to figure out how to get our needs met in newer, healthier ways that support us. We can be there for ourselves. We can be a safe place for ourselves. So when other people abandon us or when other people reject us or we're in these conflict situations, we don't feel so alone all the time. Yes? And I'm telling you, this self-love path is going to help you feel less alone. It's going to help you feel like you're not making mistakes, that you're just doing whatever, that you're on a growth path, that you'll feel empowered in your situation. You'll feel empowered in your life. You'll know how to figure out what your next step is. You'll know how to process your emotions. I'm telling you all this stuff. And yet, for a lot of us, for most of us, we go to practice these self-love tools. We go to be curious with ourselves. We go to be compassionate with ourselves. We go to ask, what do I really need and what's really going on? And why am I doing this? And where did this come from? And all of this stuff. And we don't get an answer. Or we go inside and we go there to try to comfort ourselves or try to, like I say, have compassion for ourselves. We try to be there. Yeah, someone else was saying that my video wasn't working as well. Hopefully it will just clear itself up. It might just be my internet connection is poor. But the recording will probably be clear. So if the live feed isn't as great and you kind of miss stuff, I think the recording will probably be clear because it's recording clear. So yeah, I'm just sorry about that. I can turn off the fan. I'll try turning off the fan. We'll see if that helps. Okay. So like I said, we're doing this work, we're trying to show up for ourselves, we're trying to be there for ourselves, and it just feels like there's no one home. Like we go inside to have compassion and it just feels like nothing. And I think the other thing that's really common, all right? So before I kind of get into the video, I really just want in this video to take a pause from all the theory, to take a pause from all the tools, to take a pause from all the, this is how we love ourselves and this is what we do and these are the answers and all this stuff. Because I really want to just validate and normalize and help everybody come to a center on the fact that this journey is very difficult. Okay? So I understand that the way that I talk about this stuff and how I just say, like, these are the tools, just show up for yourself, just be here for yourself, have compassion for yourself, have curiosity, all of this stuff. This is the path, yes. And, okay, and for all of us, like literally for all of us, that we are all going to have varying degrees of a journey for these tools to feel real. Okay? All of us, to some degree, so to lesser and greater extents, but I'm just still going to say all of us have been disconnected from ourselves. Okay? We have been disconnected from our emotions. We've been disconnected from our capacity to observe reality and learn from it, right? Rather, we were trained that pain means you're doing something wrong, you're bad, you don't fit in, you need to change yourself. We go into fight or flight when we're in pain instead of being able to learn from it. Like that, just that. If we had only been indoctrinated in that pain means you're doing something wrong or reality is going wrong. If we had only been given that program, that would have messed all of us up for the rest of our lives. And coming back to what real reality is would have been a really, really hard thing. If that was the only program we ever got. Right? Because that program alone is so outside of what real reality is, that to deprogram ourselves from that is a massive job. And that is only one of the faulty programs we all got, right? Okay? We were all trained on some level that multiple parts of who we are as a human being, multiple parts of our innate genetic personality isness. We were taught that these parts are wrong and bad, and that we have to get rid of them and we have to fix them in order to survive, right? Not just to be accepted and loved on a superficial level, as though that's a superficial thing. It isn't. Our desire to be accepted and approved of, right, is not a superficial thing we can just stop doing. We need to understand why we feel so desperate to fit in, why we feel so desperate to be accepted. It's because in our childhoods, being accepted and getting our needs met, aka not dying, getting accepted and getting out of pain, getting accepted and having pleasure were one and the same thing. We learned that in our bodies, in our nervous systems, before we had logical cognitive thought. Okay? That program, that external love equals survival. Yes? Was programmed into your body your nervous system, before you even had logic and reason, right? Now you can think, I can be rejected and it's fine. Why do I freak out so much? Because your physical body believes that if you get rejected, you're going to die. You're not going to get your needs met. You're going to be stuck in pain forever. And I say this in almost every video because it is so important that we understand this. It's not something you're thinking in your head consciously. Right? A lot of people brush this off because people aren't going around thinking, if my boss rejects me, I'm going to die. If my husband rejects me, I'm going to die. That is why I'm afraid to have this fight with them. That is why I pretend that I'm okay with stuff that I am not. That is why I work a job that I hate and then have to go home and binge on Netflix all night. None of us are thinking this. So we all are thinking that what I'm saying doesn't apply. But it is the root of why we do what we do. Okay? This is the core root of why so many of us never find our real passion in life or a life that actually works for us. Why we are constantly in cycles of self-help and shame and guilt and trying to fit in and trying to find our paths, and we never find it. We're just manic and depressive because we don't know how to be our own safe place where we can actually figure out who and what we really are and then how to make a life that works for that. Most of us are still doing our self-love, self-help, self-improvement from a place of believing there's something fundamentally wrong with the way we are. And if we can just fix ourselves, we will finally fit in to the culture we're supposed to fit into. There's no thought of what if the system doesn't work for me. Almost none of us are coming to our self-help or our self-improvement being like, okay, the status quo didn't work for me. What do I need to do to figure out a life that does? We're all going, the status quo didn't work. I did it wrong. There's something wrong with me that I can't make the status quo work. And my entire intention with my self-love or my self-improvement or whatever is to fix that broken thing about me that's not fitting in. You see? So that I can fit in. Still with the assumption that the system, whatever it is we're trying to fit ourselves into, is correct. And there's something wrong with us. Right? Because we're not seeing that the systems aren't built on what works for humans. The systems we have right now are built on what works for corporations to make the most amount of money. Mostly. And so there's that, okay? And again, the real reason we are all so afraid to love ourselves, the real reason that it feels dangerous and hard and scary and hollow to go inside, is because we learned so early on that these parts of ourselves, many parts of ourselves, that got us rejected, abandoned, and shamed by our caregivers and the other authority figures in our lives, were existential threats to us. So in order to feel resourced, in order to feel like we can be a safe place with ourselves, in order to feel like we can figure things out, like we have autonomy, We need to have access to all of these parts of ourselves. We need to have more and more access to more and more parts of our actual authentic nature. We need to have more and more access to our capacity to observe cause and effect and not go into shame and guilt when we have pain or when we don't fit in or when things don't go how we think they're supposed to go, and not to go into denial when things don't go how we think they're supposed to go. Because that's the flip side of the coin. If we don't go into shame and guilt when we're in pain, we go into pretend it's not happening, or I'm just going to keep doing the thing the way that I think I should do it over and over and over again, expecting different results, assuming reality is getting it wrong. We're not learning from reality. And therefore, when we go inside to love ourselves, number one, we're going to have resistance to loving ourselves. Because the parts of ourselves we don't love, the parts of ourselves that are shadowed, the parts of ourselves that we have rejected and denied and that we don't have access to. We have rejected, denied, and we don't have access to them because to us they were existential threats. We shoved them away. We disconnected from them. We tried to get rid of them. We've been trying to fix them this whole time. Because to us, to our nervous systems, they represented caregivers going away. So your nervous system is going to be fighting with you the entire time you try to show up for these parts, when you try to bring these parts into the light. Because your nervous system says, no, these parts are dangerous. These parts of us are physically, mentally, emotionally dangerous to us. They are not just parts of myself I decided not to like because some reason. They are parts of you that you have rejected, denied, shamed, guilted, tried to fix, tried to get rid of, tried to force into the box of society for your entire life. Because in your early childhood, you learned that these parts of you were existentially threatening to you. So learning to come back, to connect with these parts, to see them as not wrong and bad, to bring them into the light in their shadowed, childlike, hurting, scared, immature state, and to love them into maturity when you were taught how to do the exact opposite of that is not going to be an easy thing to do. It's not going to feel good. It's not going to feel real. It's not going to feel easy. It's going to feel, again, either impossible. It's going to feel like there's no one here to love that one there, right? You might not even be able to identify with an adult self or a higher self or a bigger self that can love these parts. It is very common and possible that when you are interacting with any of these parts of yourself, you are immediately sucked into your childhood perspective. And it's just, no, these parts are bad, and this is what I am, right? You may not be able to observe them as a part of yourself. You may just feel like that is what you are, and it's bad, and it's wrong, and it's horrible, and you got to get rid of it. And that's just the cycle that happens over and over and over again. And like I say, you might be the kind of person that when you're struggling with something, you're feeling sad, you're feeling scared, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're going through a situation, you don't know what to do. You try to go in and love yourself. You try to go in and have compassion for yourself. That just makes you feel more alone. Trying to show up for yourself, trying to be there for yourself, trying to self-soothe, triggers you into feeling even more isolated, even more afraid, even more disconnected. Because if now you have to be the one that's there for you, you might feel like that's reopening the wounds from your childhood when you were abandoned and left alone before you were ready, where you had to self-soothe before you were capable of self-soothing. It is absolutely possible that in trying to show up for yourself and be there for yourself and love yourself, you're going to be reopening, re-triggering, re-feeling all the abandonment wounds of your childhood when no one was there to comfort you and hold you and help you learn and help you grow. And it might be that you feel like, if I am here for myself, I'm agreeing to being alone, right? You might have a deep nervous system imprint that there are two options. Either you're there for yourself, you're your true self, you're your real self, you're authentic, and you're alone forever, right? If you've got that fundamental patterning belief system that who and what you are is not good, and that no one likes it. So if you were to accept yourself, if you were to be yourself, if you were to own yourself, that's accepting that you're going to be absolutely alone and abandoned for the rest of your life. Or you abandon yourself, you get rid of yourself, you try and fix yourself, and that's the only way to have connection. A lot of us feel that way. So that's going to mean when it comes time to trying to love yourself, you're going to not want to. You're going to have such resistance to loving yourself, such resistance to showing up for yourself, such resistance to embracing who and what you are, because that's going to make you feel like you're going to be alone forever. There isn't going to be that rational part of you that can understand that if you can get on your own side and if you can love yourself, you won't feel alone anymore. You're not going to feel that. You're not going to have the rational self that's going to be able to say, no, there probably are people out there who really will like the real me. That, of course, my experience up till this point is very much feeling like no one ever likes who I really am. I'm always abandoned. I'm always rejected when I am my real self. The only way to have friends, the only way to have connection, the only way to not be totally alone is to deny myself. So if I were to accept any of these rejected parts of myself, I'm accepting a death sentence. Because being alone equals feeling like I'm going to die. And being myself makes me feel like I'm going to be alone. I just want to validate that. Okay? If this work feels impossible, if this work feels like a death sentence, if this work makes you feel like if you accept yourself, you're going to be alone forever, if you go inside and feel like there's no one there, if it triggers you into feeling even more alone, more isolated, more helpless when you try to be there for yourself, if asking these parts of yourself what they need, what they want, how do I help you, makes you feel like you're asking the child part of you that also doesn't know and wants to be taken care of what the answer is. And then you just feel like you're two children trying to figure out what the child needs because there's no adults in the room. There's nothing wrong with you. Okay? That's where most of us are starting. When I started my self-love journey, I was a literal child. Okay? I was 12, 13 in my room, in my basement, and I remember feeling like I should be able to figure things out. I had just this deep sense inside that I should be able to fix problems in my life. I should be able to solve things. And I also really want to share with you that my experience of being rejected for who I was completely extreme in the sense of I know exactly how it feels to feel like the second anyone actually gets to know who you are, they leave you and they abandon you. I grew up with the belief that me being myself equals me being alone because nobody liked me. My parents rejected me. My friends rejected me over and over and over and over and over again. My grandparents rejected me. I was the odd one out of my family all the time. I was the scapegoat of my family. My friends group literally kept me around to kick me. Like, that was the point of me. I was there as the punching bag. I was so intense. I was so whatever I was. Teachers didn't know what to do with me. Guidance counselors didn't know what to do with me. Therapists didn't know what to do with me. Anyone who ever came into my life saying, oh, I'm going to mentor you, I'm going to love you, I'm going to be there for you, they'd get like 2 sessions in with me, and that'd be it. I'd be abandoned. Like, my one-to-one experience with relationships, every single relationship I ever had, up until my husband and my sister, was one of constant rejection. Right? Like, it wasn't a belief system for me. I believe that people are always going to reject me when they figure out who I am. It wasn't a belief. It was a reality. Right? It wasn't just a story I was telling myself. It was my experience. And I was just one of these people who, as hard as I tried and as much as I wanted to, I could not make myself fit in. I couldn't abandon myself enough to be what people wanted me to be. So I was just constantly rejected. And that was my experience. So I was in an existential crisis 24/7, knowing that I couldn't be what people wanted me to be. I would try really, really hard, and then I would fail, and then I'd be rejected, and I would feel like I was going to die, and it was this cycle over and over and over again. And I remember feeling, again, like I was in pain, my body wasn't working well, the life that I was born into did not work for me in any way. And I remember sitting in my basement, just being like, no, like, there has to be a way to figure this out. There has to be a way to connect to something that can help me figure out how to figure this out. Because that was the other thing. Like, my revelation that adults weren't going to help me figure this out came really early in life. Because I think when you're chronically ill and you get to a point where you're sick and the caregivers in your life very obviously don't know how to help you, and it's just, you're just sick, too bad, learn to deal with it kind of thing, you learn really fast that I learned really fast the adults around me didn't have answers. And that if I was going to figure things out, it was going to be me figuring it out. Because there wasn't someone out there who knew better than me. It's kind of how it happened. And so I understand that feeling of being a child or feeling in that vulnerable state, like I don't know what the answer is, I don't have the tools, I don't even know how to figure out what to do. And I'm totally alone and I'm totally rejected, and in order to be my real self, I have to be alone. And I remember I've gone through multiple times where it felt like I was accepting a death sentence. To say, I'm gonna accept myself. I'm not gonna play this game of society is right and there's something wrong with me and I have to fit myself into society. In accepting that, I didn't automatically feel liberation and have the answers for how to live my life. Instead, I felt completely alone and like I had no idea what to do and no idea how to figure out the answer and no idea what the next step was, right? Because if the blueprint wasn't right, there was like a sense of relief in that I don't have to try to fit into this thing that I clearly can't fit into. But then it was like, but now I have to figure it out, and I have no idea how to figure it out. And like I said, I went through a few moments of time where I just said, I'm going to have to accept that I'm just going to be alone forever. That no one is going to love me. No one is going to be here for me. Because that's reality. People don't love me. Not the real me. They love me when I'm helping them. They love me when I'm serving them. They love me when I'm Magic Alley and I'm like reading their body and all that stuff. But like my real actual self, like me just as a human being. There were no friends that wanted that. There was no family member that wanted that. And so what I'm trying to express here is that I understand what it feels like to go inside and feel like there's nothing. I understand what it feels like to feel like accepting yourself means you're accepting being alone forever. I understand what it feels like to get to a place where you think, I have to figure this out, and I have no idea how to figure this out. Because I don't know what's wrong. No one knows what's wrong. No one knows how to fix it. I get it. And I was also in a place where I had to self-soothe and learn how to self-whatever way before I was probably mentally or emotionally ready to do so. And it was triggering, and it was horrifying, and it was traumatizing. And so that's real. Okay, so if you go inside and you feel nothing, if you go inside and this feels really, really hard and dangerous, if you feel like loving yourself is like the worst thing you could do, if trying to ask yourself what you want and what you need feels like two children talking to each other and there's no adult in the room, if you can't identify with your adult perspective, if you can't feel what it feels like to be there for yourself and to have that feel like something, right? If it only feels like something when someone else outside of you is there for you, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not broken. And it's not that this path won't work for you. Okay? It's that this process is slow. This process of reconnecting to these parts of ourselves that we had to abandon in order to feel like we were protecting ourselves from certain death is slow, slow, slow work. Showing up for ourselves and realizing that we're adults now that have more power and autonomy and freedom and capacity than we did when we were children is not going to feel real for a lot of us for a long time. We're going to have to practice orienting over and over and over again. coming into the present moment and witnessing our power. Because we're gonna feel triggered and like we're back in our childhood bodies. Like we're back in our childhood when our significant other rejects us, when our boss seems to be angry with us, when we're physically ill and we don't know why. We get triggered back into that state of I'm alone, I'm a child, I don't have capacity, someone has to help me. If someone can't love me, they're not going to help me, and then I'm going to be in pain forever. That's what's happening. We don't feel empowered that we can figure it out because we weren't taught how to figure it out. We were not given the tools for how to observe reality, figure out why we're in pain, figure out what our needs are, and get those needs met in a new way, right? We were not taught if the system of normal makes you cope, numb, self-sabotage, and get addicted to stuff, the system doesn't work for you. So what do you need? Who are you? What are your needs? What is your blueprint? What is your natural way of being? And how do we support that so that you're not in so much pain that you need to cope, self-sabotage, and engage in addictive behaviors? That's the question we should be asking. But we don't ask that question, right? When we don't fit into society, when we don't fit into how it is, the immediate thing is, what's wrong with you? You're an addict. You have the disease of addiction. You are doing something wrong with your coping mechanism. Look at all these people you're hurting. You're selfish. It's your ego. You just have limiting beliefs. We just need to get rid of your limiting beliefs. No, right? Like, you have limiting beliefs for an absolute reason. Your limiting beliefs have come from your experience. You didn't just decide to have limiting beliefs. You were trained to believe what you believe. You experienced what you have experienced, and that's why you believe that. We don't operate as a society from a place of self-compassion yet. That humans are responding, and if we're responding in pain, we need to look at why that's happening. We still think pain means there's something wrong with us. We're still saying if we're not accepted by the culture, we are not safe. Because that was our childhood conditioning. So please understand that learning to show up for yourself is going to be triggering. Learning to be there for yourself is going to be scary. You are going to feel like you're going to die at times and places on this path when you are making that choice that I'm going to have to show up for myself. That's going to make you feel like I'm doing this as a, like this, it's going to feel like it's like a suicide thing. Like it's literally going to feel to your nervous system like I'm agreeing to being alone forever. I'm agreeing to not having what I need to survive because I don't know how to get what I need to survive on my own. We're going to feel like that. And like I say, it's going to feel sometimes like we are the childhood perspective. We don't know how to figure out what we want and what we need. We don't feel safe with ourselves. It doesn't feel like there's a more mature something inside loving us when we go inside. It feels like void, or it feels like we just meet with inner children. It's just inner child meeting with inner child. That's normal. That's how this is going to feel for most of us. Learning how to reorient our relationship with pain. Learning that shame and guilt are always lies. Learning that we're adults now who have greater capacities than we had when we were children. Learning that we can now be rejected and not experience death the way we would have as children. Learning this stuff. What it's like to show up for ourselves and actually feel like that's something. And that doesn't mean that we're sacrificing ever having someone outside of ourselves love ourselves. Because that's another thing too, right? So many people on this path get into this black and white thinking that if I love myself, that means that I'm agreeing that I should always be able to comfort myself and always be able to be there for myself and never need another human being ever again. And I don't want that. Right? Many people believe that the self-love path is a path of complete independence. And so we don't want to do it. Because who would want that? Who would want to agree to a life where you're saying, I am alone now. I am the only authority in my life. I never ask anyone else for help. I'm always the one that's going to comfort me. I'm always the one that's going to figure it out. I'm always going to have to know everything from inside just on my own. I am myself, my own thing, totally sovereign. Yeah, no. If that was what self-love was, I wouldn't want to do that either. Like I said, there have been times and places where I was like, even if that happens, I'm going to be doing it anyways, because my two options of continuing to try to fit in so that I have someone outside of myself at the expense of myself versus just learning to be there for myself even if it's at the expense of everyone else. The trying to get everyone outside of me to love me just was not working. So there, like I said, there have been times where I just said to myself, okay, I'm going to try to love myself. I'm going to try to figure this out, even if it means being alone forever. So that is true and that is real and that has happened. And at the same time, we have to remind ourselves that that is probably never going to be reality for any of us. Even though it feels like that, even though it really can look like we've been rejected and everything is just, no one ever loves us, and that has been our experience, we're going to find that, of course, like as we learn to love who we actually are, as we learn to mature these parts of our real self, as we start to become our real adult expression of these parts of self that got rejected in our childhoods, we are going to find people who like who we really are. And that feeling of being so alone and isolated isn't actually coming from no one outside loving us. Because it is absolutely true that when you start to be able to be on your own side, you will never feel alone again. Like, this practice for me, like I said, that I started when I was 11. So I've been doing this for like 20 years. I never feel alone. Even when it feels like my husband is rejecting me, my sister's not here, there's no one around, no one understands me, I'm going through something really painful in my body or really painful in my emotions and no one understands what I'm going through and I'm totally having to figure it out on my own, I still don't feel like I'm by myself. I still feel connected to a reality that can help me figure out my next steps. But that is something that I've developed over 20 years of practice, of not abandoning myself when I'm in pain, of not shaming myself when I'm in pain, of not assuming pain means I'm going to be in pain forever, of learning how to love myself safe and then open my perspective, right? Because again, I understand how the nervous system works. When I'm in pain, I need to learn something new. When I'm feeling rejected, or abandoned or isolated, I go into fight or flight. Because that's how our nervous systems are wired. When I'm in fight or flight, I can't learn new information. I'm just going to do the same thing I've always done because that's what my nervous system wants to do to save my life. So, my first step is always compassion for myself when I'm in pain. I'm so sorry you feel this way. I see you. It's not even, what do you need? What's wrong? What's happening? How do I figure this out? That's not the first step. The first step of the self-love path is just, I see you. I see that you're in pain. It's not your fault. I see you. I see that you're afraid. It's not your fault. I see you, and it's not your fault. I see you, and it's not your fault. That's what compassion is. And that's where we start, over and over and over and over again, until that starts to feel like something. That is where we start. We don't even start with trying to figure out why we're in pain, or what we need to do, or how to support ourselves. That's next steps. The first steps are just, I see you, and it's not your fault. I'm not going to abandon you. And like I said, that's not going to feel real, and that may even be triggering, making us feel like, but then I have to be there for myself, and I don't want to have to be there for myself. I want someone to be there for me. I'm sick of being here for myself. I don't like that I was left alone. I don't want to be my own safe place. I want someone to be a safe place for me. We have to validate that. We have to process that. We have to allow ourselves to grieve that. We have to allow ourselves to be upset that we didn't get that. We have to grieve the loss of the childhood we never had. We have to grieve the loss of the caregivers we never had. We have to let that inner child be upset and mad and scared and abandoned and not want to do this. And we say, I love you, and it's not your fault, and it's completely valid that I feel this way. Those are the first steps for most of us. That we validate that we don't want to do it. We validate that it doesn't feel good. We validate that we were abandoned before we were ready. We validate that this feels shitty. We got to make room for that. I love you, and it's not your fault. And then whatever you're feeling, you got to make room for it. Okay, these are the first steps before we even get to being on our own side and figuring out what we're going to do and how to solve our pain and all that stuff. Most of us are going to start with, I don't want to. This is triggering for me. I don't like feeling alone. I don't want to be the one that's here for me. I want someone else to be here for me. I resent that I was abandoned. I resent that I was neglected. It feels really real that if I love myself, I will be alone forever. We must validate these things. We got to process these things and emotionally process these things. We have to let ourselves be sad, let ourselves grieve, let ourselves be angry, let ourselves be resentful. That's the first step for most of us, right? We stop having shame and guilt and blame and trying to fit ourselves into society. Just for a little bit, as we acknowledge that we were abandoned and rejected and that felt shitty and we don't want to have to do this. Okay? And the other thing is, we have to remember that a lot of the time, this self-love work is cleaning up a mess we didn't make. We are cleaning up a mess we didn't make. We didn't abandon ourselves when we were children. We didn't teach ourselves not to know how to figure out what was right and wrong. We didn't tell ourselves that we had to be someone we aren't. We didn't disconnect ourselves from reality. We didn't reject our own pain. We didn't try to fit into society to fuck ourselves over. These are messes we didn't make. We didn't not learn how to be there for ourselves on purpose. Okay? We have to make room for the resentment and the anger and the grief of having to clean up this internal mess of us not feeling safe with ourselves, us not knowing how to problem solve, us not knowing how to love ourselves, as a mess we didn't make. We didn't make this mess. We didn't get ourselves into this situation. You did not make this mess. You did not get yourself into this situation. You are not coping, self-sabotaging, numbing, having negative beliefs, having anxiety and depression, having health issues because you chose to. Okay, again, this is why I think the self-help and self-improvement paths are so useless most of the time. Because they're still starting from like this fundamental assumption that we all just arrived in adulthood perfectly awesome and then just decided to fuck ourselves over. No, we were traumatized. We were trained how to not be there for ourselves. We were trained how to not know how to learn from reality. We were trained to deny our pain. We were trained to deny parts of ourselves so we never got to grow. We were trained to abandon who we were in order to fit into a society that doesn't work. So of course we need to cope and numb and self-sabotage because we're in pain. And to acknowledge our pain makes us feel like we're admitting we're doing something wrong. And that makes us bad, which then makes it that we're going to get rejected. So we feel like we're going to die. So we all just keep trying to go on with it, trying to fix ourselves quietly, never questioning society. Or if we do question society, we just rebel instead of actually figuring out why what is happening doesn't work and what really will work for us. We're just rebelling, not getting any clearer on what is real reality for us. And this is all completely backwards. It's completely bonkers. It's completely phony. It's why it's manic depressive all the time. We get addicted to self-help and addicted to self-improvement because it doesn't suit and fill the need of actually figuring out who you are and then figuring out a life that would work for the person you are. That's what self-love is about. It's not about trying to fit you into any box because you don't fit into any box. And it's not about trying to not fit you into a box because there might be some societal boxes you perfectly fit into. It's not that there is a right or a wrong. It's just a what is pragmatically correct for you so that you can live as the being that can grow. That's it. And when we don't know how to understand pain and pleasure, when we don't know how to process our own emotions, when we don't know how to figure out what's working and what's not working, when we're constantly trying to be something we've assumed we're supposed to be, and we don't even question it, and it kills us, and we can't do it, and we self-sabotage, and we cope, and we scapegoat, and we can't ever get there, and we wonder, what's wrong with me? We never think, well, maybe that's not what I'm supposed to be. We think, well, more self-help, more self-improvement, and then more crashing, anxiety, depression, coping, addiction. What's wrong with me? Nothing. So, you're cleaning up a mess you didn't make. This self-love work is you cleaning up a mess you did not make. So you're going to have resentment. You're going to be upset that you didn't have a caregiver that loved you and helped you figure things out. You're going to be upset at society for teaching you how to abandon yourself. The first steps on our path, for almost all of us, is going to be acknowledging that this self-love work doesn't feel good. It feels completely dangerous. It feels completely out of alignment because our nervous systems are trained that to be ourselves is to be abandoned and rejected, and to be abandoned or rejected equals death. We're going to feel like there's no one home. We're going to feel like we don't know how to figure it out. We're going to feel like if we admit we're in pain, We can't learn from the pain because the pain means we're wrong and we're bad. We're going to realize we have all this shame and all this guilt, and we're going to believe that those shame and guilt stories are true. We're going to believe that who we think we're supposed to become is actually real, no matter how much we hate it, no matter how much we're coping and self-sabotaging and numbing and addicted trying to become that person. We're still assuming that the formula is right and we're wrong. The first steps are going to just be, this sucks. I don't want to do this. This hurts, it's scary, I'm upset. It doesn't feel real, it's not good, I don't like it. That's reality. And we make room for that. Okay? This is why it takes so long for this to feel real. Because accepting yourself is going against your nervous system programming. Not going into your shame and guilt stories is going against your nervous system programming. And it's going to make you question your foundations of what you have been told to believe your entire life is what is going to get you happiness and freedom and joy. It's incredibly existentially threatening to do this. It is not easy. So we just keep showing up. We just keep showing up. Little by little by little, it will start to feel real. But over time, we really have to understand that this is a time thing. Over time, showing up consistently, it is not your fault. Just a little bit questioning those shame and guilt stories. Just a little bit. I hear you, I see you, it is not your fault. Even if it feels like a child talking to a child, that's fine. Even if it feels like, I don't want to be here for myself because it makes me feel like I'm going to be alone forever. Okay. Get upset that you feel that way, that no one was there for you, that you wanted a caregiver. Like, validate that. We just start with wherever we're at. And we validate and we acknowledge and we make it okay that we are where we are. That's how we start to become our own safe place. That's what it is. If asking yourself what I need feels too scary, don't do it. Step back a step. If you just really don't want to have to, validate that. Make it okay. If trying to love yourself makes you feel like you're going to be alone forever, validate that. Get upset about that. This is how we do this. Okay? It's slow. It's slow, 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 slow. And it's just showing up for the us that we are right now and what we need right now, and not trying to push ahead. Not trying to be somewhere we're not. Not trying to believe something we don't believe. Not trying to do something for ourselves we can't do. Just one little step of validating who and what you are and being upset about your experience and having to clean up a mess you didn't make. We start there. Okay? So there's nothing wrong with you. You're not doing it wrong. This is normal. This is totally normal. If you're resonating with any of these things, you are not alone. And it is not your fault. And I wish you didn't have to do it for you. Okay? It's not your fault that you have to even do this work. This is not a mess you made. You are cleaning up a mess you didn't make. So, slow, compassion. Validate where you are. You're not going to get stuck in it by allowing yourself to be upset about it. Okay, I know we all think that. I have to positive think my way out of this, otherwise I'm going to get stuck in. No. Let yourself be resentful. Let yourself be angry. Let yourself be sad. The only way through is through. The only way we get stuck in an emotion is when we don't let ourselves feel it. Let yourself process it. It will take you longer than you think it's going to take. And it's going to be questioning your foundations. It's a lot. It's scary. That's why my mystery school is 4,000 lectures long. Because we just need to be reminded of this over and over and over again. It's a long process. Okay? So, there's nothing wrong with you. Validate where you are. Wherever you are is the perfect place to start. And you're valid, and it makes sense to your experience, and you're allowed to feel this way, and it's not your fault. Okay? I love you. You're perfect. And I'll see you in the next video.